Well, we can all be guilty of procrastination at times, but when it comes to our finances, we really need to try to plan ahead. On today's episode, David's going to share with us some key areas to your finances that you really don't want to put off addressing.
Do you need help protecting your finances as you enter retirement? David Dickens of KC Financial Advisors has got you covered. Welcome to the Cover Your Assets KC podcast.
Hey, welcome to a special edition of the Cover Your Assets KC podcast. Actually, David is out of town, and we couldn't quite get a new recording done in time before he left for the week. So what we're going to do instead is bring you an older episode, but we're going to bring it back to the light. The advice, even though this was from a couple of years ago, still applies even today. And it's about procrastination and the things that we tend to put off when it comes to certain financial matters, why it's so dangerous to put these things off, and how we can kind of put some barriers or some strategies in place to maybe prevent this from happening in the future. So if you are interested in bucking that habit of procrastination, this is the episode for you. So even though it's a couple years old, I think the advice in here is timeless and something that'll be very helpful to listeners. Next episode, David will be back. We'll be fresh and brand new, so come back and join us for then. In the meantime, enjoy our prior conversation from an earlier episode of Cover Your Assets KC. David, before we dive into each of these individual elements, is procrastination, just in general, a big ailment for a lot of people when it comes to their retirement plans?
Oh, huge. I think because, frankly, whether you're a doctor, you're an engineer, you're a business person that doesn't work specifically with personal finance, there are so many nuances to the business that I'm in and to making your personal financial stuff work through. It's not a matter of being smart. I have a lot of super smart clients. They're just not particularly financially inclined. They've been really good savers. They know where they spend their money and why, but putting it all together for retirement is pretty tricky. So a lot of them tend to put that off. And I've told my nieces, my nephews, my daughters, when you're in your 30s, 20s, 30s, and early 40s, honestly, you need a very good high-level roadmap. I don't believe you need a detailed plan. You need to work on your career. You need to save at least 10% of what you make, and you need to make sure you don't have credit card debt. Hopefully buy a home. But when you're in your mid to late 50s and early 60s, putting things off, procrastinating your financial future it's not smart. And so kind of that retirement go zone of 55 and older is when you really need to if you haven't already gotten serious about your planning process, you got to stop procrastinating. So I think the topics we're going to hit today are going to be the key things that people will tend to let fall through the cracks. And once you get into that 55 and older crowd, you need to shore all these things up.
Great points, David. And so let's dive in and start looking at some of these different scenarios. So, you'll let us know, is it bad to put these things off, good, or maybe it depends in a few of these situations. We know that's kind of a favorite word of the show here. Deferring taxes. So we're putting off paying those taxes. Is that something that's good, bad, or it depends?
Well, so I guess we should start off with an it depends, but it really depends on kind of one thing. Is your tax bracket going to be lower or higher in retirement than it is right now? So if it's going to be lower, then you should defer paying taxes for as long as possible. So the question is then, will your tax rate be lower or higher in retirement? We don't know what Congress is going to do. Once those required distributions start, your tax bracket is very likely going up. And at that point, you have no choices. So the choices you make today, before you get locked in by the IRS to those required distributions, those are super important to having an understanding of how much tax you're going to pay in retirement. Unless Congress does something proactive to change this, everybody's taxes are going up in 2026 because the Trump tax cuts expire and they're going to go back to where they were in, what would that be, 2018 maybe? So for instance, if you are in the 22% bracket, then in 2026, that's going back to 25%. If you're in the 12% bracket, that's going back to 15%. So, and there are nuances within that, but my bet is that Congress is not going to make those tax cuts permanent. and we are going to revert. So everybody's taxes are going up at least a little bit by 2026.
Lots to consider when it comes to taxes, as always, and that's why that one certainly depends a little bit on your situation, but some good food for thought there. So procrastinators, you're not completely called out on that one, so no worries. How about the next one here, David? Eliminating debt. Good, bad, it depends to put that off?
It's been a long time since I've railed against credit card debt, so maybe I'll give it a 60-second rail today. There are certain types of debt which you absolutely, positively do not want and cannot carry into retirement. And frankly, if you're 40 and you got credit card debt, you need to figure that out right now. Credit card debt and consumer debt is like rust on your car or termites in your house. It's eating away at your financial future. You just might not be able to see it right now, but it is a big problem. And without going into any more detail than that, if you have those things, you cannot carry consumer debt into retirement if you want to have the retirement that you're dreaming of. Automobile debt, that's okay, unless your car is living above your means. If you retire at 65 and you're going to drive until 85, well, you're going to need a car or two during that time. So I don't have a big problem with car debt. And a home mortgage, I get this question from a lot of people, and it's a very emotional thing for my clients, let alone people you talk to just wherever you happen to be. So my view on home mortgage debt is this. If you're 64 and you just bought a big new home and you paid 20% down, that's a problem. If you have a home you've been living in for 20 years and you have a 30-year mortgage and it's at 2.5% or 3%, I don't think that's a problem at all, carrying that into retirement. Now, I have clients that say, Dave, I don't want a mortgage payment in retirement, and that's fine. They can rush that along and pay that off, and that's perfectly fine. But what I want you to remember is your mortgage payment is made up of 4 different things, almost always. Principal pay down, interest, insurance, and taxes. Well, once your mortgage is gone, you still have insurance and taxes. So when you're looking at your mortgage payment, make sure you understand that your insurance payment is going to continue, as are your real estate taxes. The other 2 components, principal pay down and interest. Well, if you have a low interest rate, then it's probably a very small percentage of the payment, because the bigger component of the payment is going to be the principal pay down. And all you're doing there is taking money out of one of your pockets and putting it into another pocket, that principal pay down. Visualize taking money out of your checking account and putting it into your home equity account. You didn't save any money by eliminating that piece of your mortgage payment. The only piece that you save is the interest payment component of that mortgage. So I, as a professional doing what I do for a living, most times I have no problem with people carrying a home mortgage into their retirement. It needs to fit into their plan. It needs to be premeditated, but that's not a big thing. So the question probably now 5 minutes ago, Walter, was, should I eliminate debt? Is that a good or a bad thing? Eliminating credit card and consumer debt is a very good thing. You have to do that. Automobile, kind of a coin toss. And home mortgage, that's really an emotional decision. I don't see a financial reason in most cases to eliminate a mortgage that's going to be paid off in the next 5 or 10 years.
So it's that one still sort of falls in the it depends, depending on the kind of debt.
Yeah. It's complicated.
Yeah. All right, that's a good one. And then how about let's talk about legal items, like setting up your legal and estate documents. Is that bad to put off? That sounds bad to put off.
Yeah, that's super bad to put off. That's even bad to put off in your 20s and 30s and 40s. So, I mean, especially if you have a young family. If you're single, then you have a lot of flexibility as to when you're going to do most of these things. But if you have a family, young family, or kids in high school or kids in college, these are things you have to have right, because you don't get do-overs if you die young. So the urgent things that I would say are beneficiary designations on your retirement accounts, any annuities you might have. Make sure that those beneficiary designations, make sure you have a primary and secondary beneficiaries. I've got stories of where both the owner of the account and the primary died in the same car wreck, and there were no secondary beneficiaries. It creates a whole new list of problems. So make sure you list primary and secondary, and make sure they're still who you want on those. They're super easy to change, but you have to actually do it. Young families and people in their 40s, cheap term life insurance is super important. It's I'm putting that into estate planning. It's not necessarily a document, but it's so important. And term insurance is so cheap that you have to make sure you're protecting your family for the next 20 and 30 years if you happen to leave the planet early. And then the other urgent things are powers of attorney, both financial and healthcare, and HIPAA authorizations. That allows doctors and nurses to talk to your family about your situation. They may do it anyway, but they're not doing it legally unless you have HIPAA authorizations. So those are the urgent things, the important things that you need to set up, legal and estate document types of things. You want to make sure that if you die young, frankly, whenever you die, your heirs don't have to pay an attorney to take your assets through probate court. And the most frequent assets of yours that are going to go through probate and are going to cost your heirs thousands of dollars and probably 9 months of headache are your bank accounts, your cars, and your home. All three of which can be handled with beneficiary designations. You just have to know how to do it.
All right, so far we've covered deferring taxes, eliminating debt, and setting up your legal and estate documents. What about Social Security? We have to bring that one into the equation, and let's put it in the context of delaying the start of your Social Security. So we're going to procrastinate taking Social Security. Good, bad, it depends?
Yeah, well, so that kind of depends too. If we knew, just the starter is that Social Security is built to be actuarially sound. And all that means is if you die at approximately your life expectancy, it doesn't matter whether you started early and got a smaller amount or started late at age 70 and got the biggest amount possible. You're going to get the same dollar amount over your lifetime if you die in your early 80s, just to kind of round it off. But if you live long or you have other types of things, then there are reasons why you might want to start early and you might want to start late. So here are a couple of examples that I've seen just over the last 2 months with clients of mine. If you've saved less than you hoped for, then honestly, you ought to work an extra few years beyond your full retirement age and delay. So your Social Security goes up by 8% a year until you start taking it. Now that's 8% simple, so here's what that means. Let's say you get $1,500 a month at your full retirement age, 66 and 4 months. If you wait, that $1,500 is going to go up by 8% a year. So $120 each year. It's not compounded growth, but it's simple growth, and that's great. So $1,500 a month becomes $1,620 a month if you wait a year. Well, if you work that year and you put money into your Roth or your 401k, you're that much wealthier in your retirement accounts. Your Social Security check is going to be that much greater. And not to be morbid, you're 1 year closer to your date of death. So your money has to last 1 year less than it otherwise would. That's the first example. The second would be genetics. If you're pretty sure that your genetics tell you you're unlikely to live into your 80s, then there's every reason to start taking Social Security early. And then I've had this 2 times in the last month. In both cases, it happened to be a husband, but the husband was 12 to 15 years older than his spouse. So the answer for them was, well, he starts at 70 to get the biggest amount possible that she will then convert to when he dies. And she starts at 62 because there's no real reason for her to wait any later. So then the final thing here is none of this was advice for you. So there are a lot of nuances to when you should optimally start Social Security. And I think what you'd want to do is get some pretty good advice on this. It's a big piece of your retirement income, and it has a cost of living increase to it, which most pensions don't have. So it's a super good benefit. And you just want to make sure that you get some good advice, or if you're a do-it-yourselfer, do your own homework to make sure that you're doing what's best for you and your family when you're not here anymore.
We knew we would get Social Security in there somehow, and it was number 4 point of the day, that's for sure. All right, last but not least, David, getting a plan in place. Good to procrastinate that? I'm going to guess this one's bad, too.
Oh, it's great to not have a plan. You know, my favorite vacations, like 3-week vacations, are when I just get in the car, pack a few shorts and shirts, and I have no idea where I'm going, but the gas is full. So obviously...
Depending on your sense of adventure, I mean, that could be a good vacation.
I just don't know people that have ever done that. But I know a lot of people that are launching into retirement without a plan, and that just doesn't make sense to me. So I would say, yeah, it's a bad thing to put off your plan. Now, I might have mentioned this earlier in this podcast, but if you're in your 20s or 30s or early 40s, your plan can be relatively simple. You have a goal of you want to be a 2x millionaire in your 401k when you retire, or you want to retire at 60, or maybe you want to retire at 55, and then your planning process has to be a lot more keen, a lot more good, and a lot earlier. But you have to have a plan, especially when you get into your 50s. And, you know, the earlier the better, because what you don't want to do is get to retirement and have fewer options than you would like to have. More options are better. I've never heard anybody sit in my office and say, wow, I wish I didn't have so many options as to what I could do with the rest of my life. You know, everybody I know wants to be able to make the choices that they want to be able to make. And that comes from feathering your own nest. In other words, saving all along the way so that you have a fairly significant amount of assets when you decide to stop working, or when you decide to work optionally. That's my favorite thing, is when people have done so well for themselves that when they get to be 58 or 62 or maybe even 67, they want to keep working because they want to, but not because they have to. So making work optional, in my view, is the goal of having a really good plan. If you're sitting there listening to this podcast today and you're 32 years old and you want to retire, you want to make work optional at 50, you need a good plan right now. So having a plan is where it all comes from. Nobody leaves for a 2-week vacation not having a plan. But a lot of people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s do not have a good retirement plan. And that's silly. It's so in your control. We've done some pretty good podcasts with the do-it-yourselfers on what's in these plans. But when I look at how I spend my time, what is most valuable for my clients, it is setting up a plan and then activating that plan, putting it into motion, and updating it every year so that they are confident that their retirement is going to work out just like they envisioned it or better. Planning, silly thing to put off. You know what? Take a couple of steps toward putting your plan in place today. At the end of this podcast, put a couple of steps in place today. You'll be so happy you did.
And if you do want to take those steps and talk to David about your own complete planning review and starting that process, just getting a good look at where you stand with your financial and retirement plan and where you need to go from here, a couple of easy ways to get in touch to start that process. One, go to coveryourassetskc.com and look on the website for where you can easily get in touch, ask a question, or set up time for that complimentary complete planning review. That's coveryourassetskc.com, and we'll link to it in the description of today's show. You can also call 913-317-1414 if you prefer to go direct to the source. That's 913-317-1414 to reach the KC Financial Advisors team. With an office in Overland Park, serving you all over the place, though. Give a call, reach out if you have any questions about your financial plan, and if you have decided, I don't want to procrastinate anymore, I want to get the job done and get my plan in place. Well, welcome to the club, and those are some ways that you can get it started. David, thanks for walking through these 5 elements that people often will put off or procrastinate. Some good, some bad, some it just depends on the situation. But appreciate your guidance, and we'll look forward to another chat next week.
Yeah, I'm glad we didn't put this off any longer, so hopefully it was helpful for people, and I'll look forward to next week as well.
Ba-da-ba-doom. Rim shot.
I'm
for
funny,
you,
Walter. I am very funny.
Got a little sense of humor, just a little bit. That's right. Very good. We'll chat with David next week, and we hope you'll be back then to join us as well. New episodes every week. Be sure to join us each time for the Cover Your Assets KC podcast. Thanks for listening. Advisory services offered through Creative One Wealth, LLC, an investment advisor. KC Financial Advisors and Creative One Wealth, LLC are not affiliated. We are an independent financial services firm helping individuals create retirement strategies using a variety of insurance products to custom suit their needs and objectives. The information and opinions contained in this program have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. They are given for informational purposes only and are not a solicitation to buy or sell any of the products mentioned. The information is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. This material has been provided by a licensed insurance professional for informational and educational purposes only and is not endorsed or affiliated with the Social Security Administration or any government agency. It is not intended to provide and should not be relied upon for accounting, legal, tax, or investment advice.